few short weeks away, and Run Pure Sports is gearing up for the season with the best deal in DFS.
For a limited time only, we are offering new members a 15% discount for the life of their subscription, including Sabersim subs. Simply use the promo code NFL15 when subscribing to take advantage of this great deal before our prices go up.
And at RPS, we don't just give you access to one sport. When you subscribe to our premium service, we give you access to all of our content, including NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, and so much more.
And we're not going to charge extra for access to our preseason content either. Our memberships include all of our content, including the NFL preseason. The best DFS players in the industry give you access to their core plays and slate strategies for every sport and for every slate. Simplify your lineup building process by plugging in picks directly from the top players in the world. Watch our premium live streams to gain a huge edge on the competition. Our guys are live up to lock for the biggest slates, walking you through their last-minute decisions, analyzing breaking news and injury alerts for the major sports.
Again, for a limited time only, you can access our industry-leading DFS content for 15% off our already low price. Sabersim packages are included, so sign up today using the promo code NFL15 for 15% off your subscription for life and start building winning lineups today.
What's going on, everyone? AP over here at Run Pure Sports, bringing to you our Saber show, our office hours with Jordan. We're 2 weeks out. We are a little ways out from NFL, but I wanted to bring this show back, and we're going to keep it going all through the NFL season. But man, I wanted to bring it back with the NFL. You know, MLB kind of like, we hammered it as hard as you possibly could. We're moving on to NFL. We also, so I need all of you to do two things. One, hit the like button. We appreciate it a ton. Two, we're running a promo right now, NFL 15. That's going to get you 15% off for life. That includes Sabersim, and that is our monthly package. It's an incredible deal. Get in there, sign up now, use that promo, NFL 15, sign up with us, and we're going to dive into a little bit of what that is going to get you if you're using the Sabersim package over here at Run Pure Sports. Jordan, what's going on, my man? How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be back on the show here today. Very excited that NFL is right around the corner here. I was messing around, running some test builds last night, starting to just getting refamiliarized with the NFL streets, and I was getting excited. So I'm excited to be back on here today. We'll run a couple builds, maybe get a chance to talk a little bit of really early strategy here. I'll let everybody know. I'm sure there's some folks watching here that haven't seen Sabersim before, so we'll talk a little bit about what makes us different, what makes this product so cool. We'll go from there.
Yeah, I love that idea. As we were talking before the show started, one thing that I love to do is I go back through the previous years and I like to look at all the Millie Maker wins from the large field tournaments just to identify different correlations inside of those builds to see if there's any rules that we can just completely apply, from a fundamental standpoint. We're going to get to that. We're going to talk about that. Let's start with it. Let's pull up the screen share and let's just go through let's kind of go through the basics. Let's get people warmed up and show them just kind of how it looks, from step one to step three. And I'll toss it back over to you and let you do your thing.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you first pull up Sabersim. I think in a lot of ways, it's going to look a little bit familiar to you if you've used any other optimizer out there, but kind of what's going on behind the hood is actually quite a bit different here. And the main reason why is because we've got average projections here, right? Christian McCaffrey, highest projected player in the field, 23.02 points on DK here is our projection. But we actually simulate out every game, play by play, thousands of times. And that projection is really just kind of the average across all of those sims, right? The reason we do this ultimately is so that we know not just CMC's average, but his full range of outcomes here, all of the different ways that he can finish on his fantasy points, and also how he correlates to the other players playing in the game. I think, in NFL in particular, people have a pretty good intuitive sense of correlations, but football is a complicated game. Not everybody plays the same way, right? CMC, you can see, right off the bat, right? Big almost 0.3 correlation to Baker, right? Just because of how many passes he catches in a given game. If we go, I'll just do like real quickly, just to show a quick example. If we look at a running back that maybe isn't as involved in the pass game, I wonder, Derrick Henry's an interesting idea here. I'm interested to see how he shows up because he was a little more involved in the passing game last year, but we can see actually right off the bat, Tannehill, his correlation to his quarterback is only 0.12, right? So, very common question people get is they know they want to stack. They know they want to stack their quarterback with pass catchers, but then you start to get into the weeds of, well, what running backs are pass catchers, right? Like what teams throw to the running back a little bit more, all those kinds of things. That's part of the advantage you get out of simulating games. So the coolest part about Sabersim ultimately is that this data gets taken into account when you're building your lineups automatically. So we'll leverage those ranges of outcomes of each player along with those correlations, and you'll get very, very good, a very strong foundation of lineups right out of the box without doing anything. Now, there's a ton of ways to add some value, to improve those lineups, to make them better. We'll talk about some of that here on the stream, but your lineups that you get, because we understand those correlations and the ranges of outcomes of players just right out of the gate, will be way better than what you would get out of pretty much any tool out there.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and that's important. And, we talk about it all the time. You can even use that as part of your research throughout the week. Maybe you're a hand builder and you want to look at different correlation factors between a quarterback and their playmakers, running back, receiver, tight end, et cetera. And you can make note of that. I love, and that's one benefit of obviously running simulations there. How does it, so like talking more so throughout the season, how do the simulations that you guys run, how do they change, or how does it impact on a week-to-week basis as we get to week 4, week 5, week 6?
Yeah, really good question. So, right now, obviously heading into week 1, first week of the season, we don't have any in-season data for this year. We have basically the way it kind of works is the guys that work on the models and the sims themselves, they have an algorithm set up. It's called a decay rate. And basically it's how much more do you value recent information compared to the past information, past seasons. So I don't know the technical side of that, but basically what we do is, after game 1 takes place, week 1's over, we have 1 data point this year. We'll start incorporating that new information we have appropriately along with whatever we have for that player's past career, right? Jonathan Taylor, right? If he goes out and has a dud game on week 1, or not even, maybe even just like, 100 yards, no touchdowns, right? Average game, maybe below his average projection, didn't score, something like that. We're going to take that as a data point. That will be a piece of information used when we go and do the week 2 sims. It's not going to be the only data point. It'll be weighted accordingly along with how we understand that JT's a beast and his past career. So, everything gets weighted accordingly with how recently it took place. And as we have more information throughout this season, we'll start to weight the factors of this season a little bit more.
Yeah, cool. So hey, Jordan, let's do a couple things. Let's work through a bit, like just a basic build right now. Obviously we're working on, we're 2 weeks out. Yeah. There's a lot that needs to be done, ownership and projections, refining them a little bit, but let's just see where things are at. And then what I want to do, one thing, as we were talking, before the show, just about the rules that I've identified, I have currently right now, I'm not done with all of my research, and I'm actually working on an article that I'm going to put out there for Run Pure Sports members, just going over these really fundamental basic rules to have. But what we'll do is after this first build, then let's go back and let's rerun builds using like a couple very fundamental rules by putting them in there and then seeing what the builds look like.
Yeah, that sounds good here. Yeah, that's
the other thing that will be interesting. So we have a couple new features coming this year. So one thing, Jordan, you probably remember the NBA heat map, something I do. Mm-hmm. We've created now an NFL heat map. We're going to have DraftKings and FanDuel Our boy Glaucoma, he's going to be managing the FanDuel one. I'm going to be managing the DraftKings one. The idea behind this tool is to identify these primary stacks, secondary stacks, and to highlight and identify value, elite value mispricing. Because one thing that I found last year, looking at the Millie Maker winners, there was some sort of correlation in every single Millie Maker winning lineup. But a big thing last year was identifying like mispricing opportunities, like value plays that really went off and didn't necessarily have any correlation inside of their lineup. So using those tools plus Saber and some of these rules that we're going to talk about will definitely give you an edge heading into the NFL season. I see that you're building lineups right now, so kind of start talking to us, through the lineup building process when we're here. And what are we, step 3? Or
yeah. So what's happening here? So if you've been following along here, I clicked like a 20 max build and just said build some lineups for a 20 max. We're actually building 500 of those lineups, right? Just instead of the 20 that I need here. The main reason for that is because that's going to let me kind of fine tune, get all of my lineups exactly the way I want them from that pool of 500, rather than every time I find something I don't like, having to completely go back and start over. So this is, as you mentioned, this is default settings. I didn't touch a thing. We didn't touch any projections. We didn't touch any build settings. We'll kind of see just how things are shaken out here. On my test builds last night, when I was just doing this, I noticed there were a couple things that I wanted to add in. There were a couple things I wanted to change, but we can go over and just look at the stacks. And right off the bat, most popular stack in our 20 is a QB +2 with 1 run back. We have QB +2s and QB +3 with no run backs. QB +2 with 2 run backs on the other side, like kind of the right overall constructions that I think in general, I like to see for my lineup. So right off the bat, right, not really having to do a lot of work there to get the right kinds of constructions. And we can just go ahead and start like looking at this build here a little bit, or what do you want to do?
No, I like that. So, right out of the gate, we have a nice little, quarterback plus 2 playmakers, receiver and tight end, running it back with an opponent running back, which is definitely unique. But you do have DeAndre Swift, who's a pass catching running back who's involved in the pass. Like if the Lions are playing from behind in that game, you can benefit both ways. If they're playing ahead, I would argue almost it might be better because we see Goff check it down all the time. So that's a really interesting build there. Now, these correlations, we haven't put any rules in, right? This is one benefit from Sabres. We're just getting natural like correlation built in. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. And I was actually going to scroll down a little bit to see if we can see one where there are some of those. So this is actually, let's see. This is a decent example too of just like some of those other correlations. So Breece Hall for the Jets here will have, once this loads here, actually, a decently sized correlation to his own defense. It's generally a somewhat common minor correlation, same team running back and defense. So you'll get a couple of those correlations naturally showing up in here. Basically like the punt play Jets defense, probably a bit of a contrarian play against Baltimore, but you get the positive correlation with Breece Hall on the running back.
Speaking of that, a little a quiz question for Jordan, but I look at all of this and I break it down in a very detailed way.
Yeah. Of
the 18 Millie Maker winners, regular season, talking the large field, the $20, how many of those winners do you think had an RB plus defense correlation in there?
I'll say 15%.
It's actually 35%.
35%.
There was 7. Yeah, it's a very strong secondary correlation to have in there. So that was something that I thought I was with you when I broke it down. I thought it was going to be actually much lower than that. So that's a rule that you can look at and you can implement depending on what, because I always thought it was like a good, like maybe single entry, smaller field type of rule to have in there. I was very surprised at how high that correlation was for Millie Maker winners last year.
Yeah. And I mean, we didn't even put a rule in here to do any of this. Like we can go in and we'll talk about some of those rules that we can put in to fine tune and like really make your lineups look exactly the way you want. Cause not every lineup in our pool is going to have a running back with the same team defense in it, but you can see, I mean, as we're going down the list here, a lot of them do. I mean, it's actually pretty consistent. In this case here we have one where we have the Giants defense that's not stacked with a running back, but Barkley with the Giants, we have Najee with the Steelers, we have Brees with the Jets. One of my favorite reasons why I like that particular stack too is because otherwise the defense just feels like a total crapshoot, and it just feels nice to correlate it, have it kind of match up to one other part of the lineup somewhere where you're at least kind of, it feels like you're not even just picking names out of the hat with the defense pick as much as when you have that correlation there.
Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. One thing that I was really interested by doing this base build, I wanted to see. So when I brought up the heat map, I got so excited talking about it. I forgot where I was going with that. Where I was going with that point was the afternoon games are going to be very elite from a fantasy standpoint. We got Raiders, Chargers, Chiefs, Cardinals. Packers, Vikings. Packers defense is probably going to be pretty good, but you have Justin Jefferson there, who is, obviously a guy that people are very, very high on going into the season. I am as well. I'm not a huge best ball guy, but our guy Simon behind the scenes producing the show right now. Him and Snyder have been producing excellent content, and I've been trying to snag up Justin Jefferson whenever I can. Even like people probably call me a donkey, but even before CMC and Johnny Taylor, just because I think it gets me a little bit different in those contests. And again, I'm not a best ball expert by any means. I kind of just do whatever I want with it and have fun with it. But I'm really, really high on him coming into this year. So I was actually really interested in seeing kind of the builds there. Another thing in week one, it's trying to find that value, mispricing, and that's so having good correlation, foundational correlation, but making sure that we're not, avoiding some of those value plays, I think is going to be important. So how about this? Let's go back through unless there's anything else you wanted to touch on here, like going through like the stacks and stuff, or we can get into that on these next runs. Let's start adding in a couple of basic rules. If that sounds good for you.
I think that sounds good. Yeah. And I do think, I know for a lot of people, for football, people are, myself included, are kind of opinionated about what types of stacks and constructions you want to see. So I think it's a really good opportunity for football in particular to explore some of these rules and to set those rules. You'll just get lineups that you're happier with. One thing I'll note before we dive too deep in here is actually kind of an overhaul of this section of the app is our in progress development project. It's the next thing we want to do. So we're planning on making this way more powerful, also way more easier to use. I think at times the stacking rules can confuse people. So we'll show how to do this here today with the rules we have set. But I think early in the NFL season, we're planning on having a pretty exciting update come out for the stacking and groups and stuff like that.
Yeah, very good. That's going to be awesome. So a few rules that, all right. So going back, looking at the 18 milli maker winners, I think that's just an interesting base point to use. Every single one had a primary correlation. I defined primary correlation as our quarterback plus one playmaker. That doesn't include running it back with a player from the opposing team. So just having that base. So we're not doing any naked QB lineups, basically, is what I'm saying. So if you go back and look at every milli maker lineup, it had one basic correlation like that. How do we put that rule in here to Saber, just so that it for all the teams that we're trying to target, we want to make sure every build has that most basic correlation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what we would want to do here first. So I'm going to use the advanced stacking. I think they're a little bit easier to just get exactly what you're looking for. So we'll add the new rule and then we're going to go edit positions here. And we're going to say we want in every lineup, we want our QB and then we're going to match that up. I think there's a couple different ways we can do that. Exactly as you just described it, I think would be saying more than or equal to one running back, wide receiver, or a tight end from the same team. I might add on to that if you don't mind. I actually kind of like to use the range here, and I'll say 1 to 3.
I like it.
I don't like every once in a while, you don't get a lot of them, but Sabersim will occasionally build you like this big onslaught team where it's like a QB +4. And I just think it's not my favorite kind of lineup construction. I think we'll just eliminate that right from the get-go by saying 1 to 3.
There was, and I got it broken down too. So I'm glad you brought that up, because one thing I've found that I did is I overstacked a little bit too much when I went back and reviewed my process from last year and the year before.
Yeah.
But if you look at it, it was about 54% of the builds were just a quarterback plus one playmaker. So that includes no run backs and then one run back. So that would be over half of the Millie Maker winners last year. Then you get into QB plus two. That was also with no run backs, was actually 22% for the 18 builds there. And you only had one time where it was a QB plus three and one run back. There was one build, and it was when it was later on in the season, it was I think it was one of the Joe Burrow, the Bengals Ravens game, I think, where it just went absolutely off. So it's a really interesting point there. I like this range because we don't want to necessarily overstack something that I love to do. It just, especially when you have this many games, it doesn't happen like that often, where you just see these games go off from both sides. So I like that rule. What about our secondary rule that we already covered, that was in 35% of the lineups last year, which is a running back plus their own defense, having that as a secondary rule built in.
So same deal then. So what we would want to do here, we'll click new rule, and then we'll go ahead again and just edit the positions here. So one thing I want to make it totally clear. So the way this works is your primary team is like your team one, right? The players from that team you want. The opposing team is the team playing them. So in this case, we're not worried about, we're talking about same team running back and defense. So we'll just do both from the same team here. We'll say basically for every running back, right, we're also going to have a defense on that team. And then I'll just make sure. And one thing to note, at least as the way these are currently set up right now, this is applying to 100% of your lineups. That's going to be something that'll change in the new update. You'll be able to say only apply this to so many lineups. But for now, these are 100% of your lineups. So for that one, it's easy as that.
Yeah, very good. And then just so that should we run it now, or should we make a few? Well, what about what about changing some of the totals like we did with MLB? Do you like doing that with NFL at all, or a couple? Well, first, so you said you don't want to force a run back here in the primary stack, right? You leave it open ended on there. So I like to first leave it open ended, but then because I was kind of surprised at how many just 5 out of 18 of the winners last year had that QB plus one and no run back. You could put, one thing is we probably don't want more than like 2 run backs. So you could do a range of 0 to 2, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. Let's do that. So what we'll do here is I will say less than or equal to 1 player from the opposing team, running back, wide receiver, or tight end. So in that case, it can run it back with 1, but it can't do more than 1. So that
I like that.
Cool. The one other thing I was going to ask too, I don't know if you have any data on the other secondary stacks.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm glad you asked.
Okay. Do we want to throw one more in here? I don't want to overkill the lineups by putting too many rules in. But I do think it can be kind of fun just to put a few of these in and see what the lineups are looking like. Yeah.
So last year, and I'm just looking at Millie Maker winners, but if you look at the other thing I do is I break it down first, second, third. And you can look at the different, correlations, primary, secondary. So the second most popular secondary correlation was wide receiver and opposing wide receiver. That was in 15% of builds from the same game. And then running back plus opposing wide receiver was in 10% of the builds. So, 25% of the builds right there had an opposing receiver paired with a wide receiver, or running back from our team. So, and you could actually, I think in today's NFL, you could include tight end if you wanted to, just because you're bringing in the Kyle Pitts, some of these really elite tight ends who are basically, wide receivers now.
And I think we should.
Secondary.
I think that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's what I've done here. So I've said for 1 running back or wide receiver or tight end on the primary team, run it back with a player on the opposing team. We have quite a few rules in here now. I think mathematically this works, but I'm not positive. So
Yeah,
we'll see if the build works.
I mean, it should. It should, but I guess we'll see.
The one thing you mentioned, team totals. I think it can be a pretty good way to make adjustments here. I would say for now, I think we should just run it just because it's so early and the projections are just they're gonna get updated a lot anyway. I think this is just kind of almost more for fun, seeing how things are looking.
Yeah, I like that.
The last thing I'm gonna do right now, I'm gonna uncheck tight ends from the flex position. I don't think that's necessarily a thing that you have to do all the time. I think because we're using the sims to get to get the lineups we want, you'll only get like double tight end when it really makes sense. But while we're still dialing in the projections, dialing in the sims and everything like that, I just don't like seeing those double tight end builds. So I'm going to uncheck that as well.
Yeah, I believe I had that number too. Double tight end builds. There were a couple, and definitely later on in the season. I thought I had that. It was more so, I believe, when I'm looking at the top three, so the Millie Maker winner plus second place, third place. But there definitely was a few. So I think week 14, third place was Kittle and Knox. Even week 13 was Goddard and Kittle. And that was the 13 winner. But it only happened a handful of times. Week 15, Mark Andrew. Oh, no, never mind. Again, that was I think the third place winner. So only a handful of times where we saw a double tight end prevail in the Maker builds.
Well, and I mean, there's a handful of elite tight ends, and plus people hate playing two tight ends. So I think it is a really good way in a tournament that big to get pretty different. I just think for the first build, my first impressions of the slate, I typically don't want to play the double tight end builds as much, but we'll let this build. It'll take a little bit longer just here now because it's processing 3 different rules, making sure that all those lineups are fitting those constructions. But we'll give it a couple seconds to build out our pool of 500. Then we can talk about what we're seeing. We can talk about editing some exposures here and see how things are looking.
Yeah, there was an interesting one. So occasionally this popped up last year, and obviously because of Cooper Kupp and the elite year that he had. And I do think this could be the case this year, where we had there's multiple weeks where we just had where it was like load up on these stud receivers, and their upside just literally carried your build to the top. Whereas Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, and that's where when I look at this, especially early on in the season and this season, looking for pricing opportunities. And so kind of what I'm going to do, and this is maybe a show or two, later down the road that we do, but where I use these rules, but then I'm going game by game and I'm trying to identify those potential opportunities and then manually bumping up their projection a little bit more to so that they possibly hit my more lineups as a one-off. Let's see what this looks like.
Yeah. So now, I mean, all of these lineups are going to look pretty beautiful with all the secondary correlations. I mean, in this one, right, you've got the Hurts with AJ Brown. Obviously, I think the Sims kind of like the Eagles against the Lions quite a bit this week so far, but you've got the Hurts with Goddard and AJ Brown. No run back in this one, but Najee plus go ahead.
Which is fine though, because in 22% of the builds last year, it was a QB plus 2 playmakers, no run backs. And right out of the gate, we saw that too. Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey Hill, not having any run backs there when they played the Browns was actually key in that game. So that's where I honestly messed up last year. I felt if I had a receiver and 2 playmakers, I'm like, I always need a run back.
Yep.
And that was part of kind of, a problem that I had with my process last year. And I was surprised. And this isn't just like last year. If you go back and look at it, the data is pretty interesting.
Well, and I think, one thing I've read there too, is that you can sometimes kind of tell how badly you want to run back in that game based on the quality of the opponent, right? Like against the Lions, I think there's a case to be made that the Lions might look a little bit better this year, but this isn't like a particularly dangerous team. It's easy to imagine a game script where the Eagles just like blow the Lions out and you don't need that Lions piece coming back. Whereas, there's other teams, there's other games on this slate. Maybe if you're playing the Chargers Raiders game, that's a game where it makes a little bit more natural sense to have the run back there just because there's so much talent on both of those teams. The shootout game script is a little more imaginable to me. So But yeah, I mean, the lineups, they're all looking pretty good. They'll all have kind of those same correlations that we're talking about. In this one, we actually do get the run back here again with DeAndre Swift. We have the secondary correlation. We have Dotson and Christian Kirk, a game that I don't think people will be on. So we kind of have that like secondary little correlation there. Saquon with that giant stack again. All these lineups will have all those correlations that we put in there.
So this question just came to my head, maybe a little bit off topic, but one thing I like to do. So like I'm going to be targeting the Millie Maker a lot this year. Mm-hmm. I used to be, a 6 to 12 lineup player, having like 6 to 12 main, but I really wanted to embrace the technology that we have and the partnership with Saber. And I feel like we have a nice edge in, attacking some of these Millie Maker slates. So that's going to be my primary focus this year. And actually, like from a volume standpoint, it doesn't like change that much. I'll be pretty much in line. But I think, as long as I understand most weeks, I, probably will not have like a huge return. I'm still, banking for that high upside build. One thing I like to do with those is I like to, so one, that primary correlation. Let's just say I want 25% of my builds to have Mahomes as the main quarterback. So like what I like to do is run that subset of builds all together. Is there a way, and then like go on to like a Josh Allen or like a Jalen Hurts and run. So I'm running like 2 or 3 different subsets of builds. Is there a way to do that and then save them so that we can import all of those lineups together at the same time? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. So there isn't a way like to do that where you're taking like 25 lineups from here, 25 from there, 25 from there, and all adding them back together at the end. I would say, honestly, you should just be able to just do this just with your exposures. Like we could just come in here right now and just say, hey, give us 25% Mahomes. And now we have 25% Mahomes. And we can go see like what those lineups are looking like too. And again, because we set all those rules, like they should have the correlations that we're hoping for here. I would say
some of these builds just off the top, like I wonder what people think of Christian McCaffrey, but 8,500 is just is too cheap for the type of volume that he can put out there, especially with Baker back there, just dumping it off to him. It's going to be a fun week one, just looking at the texture of some of these builds. But so you didn't even have to go back to step one there. You just right there, you went to the players and bumped up Mahomes and automatically builds pulled up. That's really interesting.
So I set 25% minimum exposure to Mahomes, and then what the builder goes, I only have 20 lineups here. Obviously, if you're maxing out the Millie or maxing out, if you're playing 150 lineups, the one other thing I would have done is built a 1,500 lineup pool size, just so you have more lineups to work with.
Yep.
Especially if you're editing those exposures. But yeah, I mean, who are some of those other QBs you mentioned? Like what?
So I'm looking at like right now, and this is so early, but
for sure.
If you look at the Chiefs, like Mahomes, like the ability to stack them up is just so cheap. Also looking at the Raiders game, so Justin Herbert, and then Derek Carr as well with the newly acquired Devontae Adams. That game is going to be a game that should definitely be able to go off, and then I think more of like in tournaments. I do worry about the Packers defense. I think they'll be pretty good, but Kirk Cousins potentially just with the Justin. I'm looking at Justin Jefferson as more of kind of as an elite one-off where like I want a high upside, receiver target there, but he's definitely someone I'm looking at. And then I mean, you kind of have me rethinking Jalen Hurts as well. I'm gonna have to add him to 25 implied team total right now. 6,800. We know what kind of upside he carries, so I would also include him as well.
Yeah, and he is definitely the Sabersim favorite, as the Sims are right now. If you guys go on and mess around and start building some lineups, the Sims are definitely favorable to Hurts right now, which I think is actually likely to stay where it is. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come down a bit. I think he's going to be I think the Eagles are going to be pretty popular on week one as well. Again, with the rushing upside here, kind of in a tier of his own here, almost, with like Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, but way cheaper. 6,800 is just like far cheaper than some of these other guys. So I think he's going to be a popular option. But as you were talking, I was just like, following along here, adding these min exposures here. So, I mean, now we have 25% Hurts, 25% Cousins, 25% Carr, and 25% Mahomes. And, you know, this is just, again, this is for 20 lineups here. But we've got that like kind of textured build here with all of these different guys. You see, I mean, we could take a look at this Kirk Cousins lineup here, right? In this case, Cousins, Jefferson, and Thielen. We have AJ Dillon on the other side, who has some pass catching volume there. We can check his correlation to Rodgers real quick here and see that there is a correlation there. If we decided that we didn't like the running back run back as well, that's something that we could go back and remove in the build settings and rebuild the lineups. But yeah, I mean, here's the Carr lineup, right? Carr with Devontae Adams and Renfro. No run back in this build, but we get some nice other secondary correlations as well. So looking pretty good.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'll probably have more Mahomes, lineups myself, but I like how the texture of builds look. And I'm trying to think what other, so like the two main things in there, I mean, can you go over just to the actual like player exposure? Can we see, because I want to see what are our main one-offs? How would we look at that? Would it be in the stack section, team section, or looking at players? So yeah. Saquon is kind of one of the main guys that, 6,100 at the Titans.
Yeah. So it's kind of, it's a little bit hard to like look at a player and identify if they're used as a one-off. Plus, since we have like so many secondary correlations built in here, we just don't have a lot of one-offs. Like most players in every lineup are correlated to at least one other player in there. But yeah, I mean, we have Saquon in 70% of our lineups, and we have no giant stacks based on the current way we've had this set up. So you can also edit that down, right? If we say, hey, like I like Saquon, but that's a little bit too much for me, we can come in here, bring that back down to like 50% or so, which should even things out a little bit more. 45% of a defense to me is kind of a lot. That seems a little extreme, like maybe only 20% giant stacks, maybe, or Giants defense makes a little more sense. Partially because we've attached running back to defense in all of these lineups. We're going to end up probably with a lot of exposure to our favorite defense just because they're always going to be tied to some of our favorite running backs, but we can even that out a little bit here.
Is there a way to put a cap on what we're exposed to any one defense? Or I guess you could do it manually. You could just go to the projections, defensive settings, and like put everyone at 20, right?
Yeah, I mean, we can do that here too. Like we could come here and just like max exposure to any one defense is now 20%. We have 20% Jets, Bears, Giants, Steelers, and then a little bit of Panthers and Commanders here. That's an easy way. If you know that information beforehand, you can absolutely come back here to the projections tab.
Now go over to running back and see, because that should have automatically changed our running back exposures as well, right?
Yep.
Since we have those two tied together.
Yeah, it should have. We'll go ahead and I shouldn't have bounced back over to the projections. There we go. We'll go check our running backs now. Yeah, and it flattened us out a little bit at running back too, which I don't think is a bad thing either. So yeah, now we're a little more even here. So
we have a question here in the YouTube chat. What is the best way to target certain positions? Higher touches for running backs, higher targets for receivers and tight ends. Can it be done in step 1 or the filters in step 3?
Yeah, so I assume you're talking a lot about the flex position here. I mean, there's a few different ways, because obviously you have to play the 2 running backs, you have to play 3 receivers, you have to play 1 tight end. So the leftover position is like, who do you play in your flex? There's a couple ways to do it. The most like extreme version here would be just saying, like, I don't want this position in my flex spot. I only want these positions. I know a common thing I hear in cash is that people want to play running backs in the flex position for that floor. I've also heard in GPPs, people want to play the wide receivers only in the flex for that ceiling. Again, I think even if you leave all 3 of these checked, you're still going to get good lineups, because if you're getting a player in the flex position for a given lineup, it means they were the best player to use for that sim, right? It's not just because they fit based on the average projections. You can also come back here, click this flex right here, this flex tab. This is going to show you your exposure to different players in the flex position. Right. So you can look at this here and see, this isn't saying we have 20% Eckler overall. This is saying we have 20% Eckler in the flex. So you can see in this particular build, I would say pretty balanced, maybe a little more heavy on the running backs in the flex spots than the wide receivers. But if you wanted to limit that, if you wanted to say, hey, I only want running backs in my flex, you could go through here and X out some of the receivers, clean this up a little bit, and you could end up with running back only flex just on the post build process too.
Yeah, very interesting. So is there a way, I know we don't have ownership put in there right now, but just looking at the pat, so it's kind of interesting. I don't get caught up in this too much. I like to make sure my builds just have good correlation built into them. But if you are kind of a stats person really diving into it, the average total ownership of all 18 millimaker builds last year was 98%. The highest was 122. The lowest was 28. So if you want to work off an average there, is there a way to, control that through this build process? Put like a min and max total owner. Does that question make sense?
It does. Yeah. So not an automated way at the moment. That's something else we want to add. I will say this own number here right now, it says 0% because just too early to have accurate ownership projections up for week one. But once the ownership projections are in there, this number will populate. And then you could go through and you could like trash lineups that don't. I think the easiest way to do it would be to just go through your lineups top to bottom. And if they don't meet what you're looking for the ownership, just trash it. And then just move on to the next one. And you could kind of back into your final lineup set that way. We do want to add filters for stuff like that. Saber score, projected score, ownership, that kind of thing in step 3 in the future. That's on the list.
Yeah. One other just interesting, kind of, random fact, the average salary was 49,937. There was a lot of millimaker winners last year that used all 50K. So I think when you ran those builds too, you had the minimum set at what, 49.5?
Yeah, it was 49.5 by default. I dropped it to 49,000 just to give it a little more room. But yeah, 49.5 is generally our default for most NFL contests. So yeah, and you can see even at 49, all of the builds at the top are like very high salary, 49.8, 49.7, 49.9. There were a few, there's a 49.4, a little bit of a lower one for 50, right? So pretty easy just with big rosters and a large player pool to use a lot of that salary most of the time.
Yeah, very good. So just kind of interesting things to note. And obviously, as we get closer to NFL starting up and as we're going through the season, we're going to be able to do a lot of fun things with this show. We're going to keep this, we're going to try our best throughout the whole season to keep the show to 45 minutes, just to keep it nice, easy, on point for all of you out there. Again, moving forward, if you have questions and if you want us to cover different items in here, shoot me a DM either on Twitter or in Discord. Give me those questions ahead of time so that, we will definitely get to questions while we're on the show here. But if you want us to look at anything into greater detail, it's easier if we have that question ahead of time. So if you're watching this, you have questions or things that you want us to cover as we are, approaching the NFL season. So next week and the week after, obviously, shoot that to me on Twitter or in Discord. And Jordan, any kind of final things that you want to discuss today? I know we're gonna keep doing this next week. Yeah, and after we're gonna keep the show running on Thursdays as well moving forward. I think that is the plan. Any final thoughts today?
No, I'm just super excited for some football, some NFL DFS too. It feels like it's been a long time coming. It's been a long summer. Excited to keep doing this show. I would say, anybody that tuned in and watched this one today, go and do a practice build, right? Go and mess around, try to get your lineups the way you want them to look, even with just the early sims, and figure out what questions you have for me and AP here, and then come back next week, watch the show again, or even just fire them away in Discord in between now and then, and let us know what your questions are. I know baseball is still going on. I know, maybe you're still grinding the MLB streets, but throw a practice NFL build in there when you have some time, and just remind yourself what it kind of feels like. Cause I was a little bit rusty when I first started messing around with this yesterday, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to do this and I want to do that. And I had to kind of remind myself. So don't let that first NFL build come Sunday morning of week 1.
Yeah, that's a good point. One quick question, and then we'll get out of here. Mike Carr, when upping the score for a stack, you like in football, how much would you up the team total?
Yeah, good question. So I talk a lot, I've mentioned in the past, like a half run to a run for baseball. I start typically with 3.5 points as my first gut check. So one example, so when you were actually talking, we actually didn't get any Justin Herbert that first build. I know you had mentioned you like the Charger stack. So if I wanted to kind of give that a nudge in the right direction, I might start by, and I actually think it's just easier to type it in here. I might start by bumping them up to 29 points here, which is 3.5 points more than their total, half of a touchdown, right? That's kind of how I like to think about it as the first try. Then we can come in, you'll see here, that the projections for this game update accordingly. Whoops, I lost it there. Go ahead. Right. So now all of a sudden, Herbert's bumped from 18.92 to 20.8, right? That's going to be a pretty healthy size bump. Everybody else bumps up accordingly. You go, I'm not going to do this now because I know we're trying to get out of here, but you go and rerun the build. You'll probably get a little bit more. If you don't get more Herbert at that point, you can do another 3 points, or maybe it's an indication that he's overpriced or over-owned or otherwise doesn't fit into the constructions that week. So it might be a good opportunity to kind of go back and check your work there.
Yeah, like a final note too is this tool is like so fun to use while you're watching shows. Maybe it's BigT, maybe JSU. They make a good comment, on the Print Factory show, which is going to be Fridays for members only. And you could have Sabersim up at the same time, and you could work some stacks. Maybe JSU is very high on a certain stack, and you can run that and look at that, and you can save it and title it. Hey dummy, go back and look at this build. Make yourself a note. Really, really easy to do here in Sabersim. So yeah, Jordan, man, I'm excited. This is going to be a ton of fun. Every Thursday is going to be the plan. I believe Mangone will be on next Thursday with you, Jordan. It's going to be me most weeks, but I'll be in Arizona. We do an annual little friends trip. I convinced them all to do it, move it up before NFL season last week during NFL season, which is not fun. Because it's just such a grind over here. So that's where I'll be for just a couple of days, so we'll get Mangone or someone else in here, and you'll get a different perspective, which is going to be really nice. But this show, the plan is Thursdays, right around this time. So yeah, with that, again, final notes here. Send me DMs, send Jordan a message also if you have ideas, things that you want us to cover, and we will make sure to cover them. So I'm AP, that's Jordan. Simon, get us out of here.